Hey everyone, Internet PCS book reader here. Today I want to talk about three words, Memories of an Arab Jew by Avi Shlaim. Since there are now more and more unread dumbasses like this podcaster, this streamer, or this gamer who are putting out so much Israel propaganda, contents and books that are educating us based on factual evidence, unfortunately just got more and more important since these lazy people are influencing other lazy people who can't be bothered to read further into what they knew from social media or just googling misinformation. So here's the autobiography of Avi Shlaim, an Israeli and British new historian of Iraqi Judaism, just like Ilan Pape. As the title of the book says, he is an Arab Jew. The book even opened up by him recollecting a memory when he was hanging out with his friends in Ramat Gan. He remembered his father approached him and started talking to him in Arab, and he remembered being ashamed having to speak Arab in front of his friends, knowing that his friends will be judging him from having a father who speaks Arab and judging him from replying in Arab. He wished his father would speak to him outside of home in Hebrew only and left the Arab speak only at home where nobody could listen to them speak Arab. And that was exactly what he replied his father with in broken and whispered Arab, which he realized now in hindsight must be humiliating for his father to experience because his own son was judging him from speaking in Arab. Avi was born in Baghdad in 1945, 3 years before the State of Israel was born, and then he and his family moved to Israel in 1950 when he was 5. Because Israel sees itself as part of the Western world, he grew up in an environment where Arab Jew settlers along with African Jew settlers were viewed by the European Jew settlers as people from inferior culture, and Avi internalized those beliefs. That's why he was ashamed of his father speaking to him in Arab in front of his friends. And that was only one of the messed up beliefs that he internalized during his youth in Israel. Part of this belief, of course, came from his own youthful inferior complex, where he viewed himself being there as someone with no way to a bright future because of his handicap of being an Arab Jew. It was not until later on, once he grew up, learned, and matured enough that he sees some advantages of being an Arab Jew that came from Baghdad. His unique point of view after seeing the long and protracted Arab-Israel conflict. He saw the absurdity of not only people who wrongly attribute Israel's Zionism that has eaten most of the state to all of the Jews around the world, ignoring the existence of the Jewish voice or peace, and the absurdity of people who saw Israel as a state that can do no wrong and Arab as a people that can do no right. It is this belief that eventually will turn most of Israel into Zionism, whether they're from the conservative right wings or liberal right wings. Even Avi in his youth turned into the right wing movement of Israel settlement. The kind of people who attacked aids to Gaza and protested because they are not allowed to rape Palestinians. Thankfully, he was sent away to study in England at the time, so he managed to get out of an Israel way of looking at things in ways that supported the current genocide. And as a child who was born in Arab culture, a boy who was raised in Israel culture, and a teenager who grew up outside of those two cultures, he sees things that people might miss and wrote it and his experience into this book. By calling himself Arab Jew, he doesn't mean he's half Arab, half Jew or anything of sort. It's just he was born and raised in Arab household that came from Iraqis as the minority Jews there. And he was lucky enough to be born there before Zionist supremacist idea took hold of Western civilization. In fact, despite being a Jewish family, they live more like the Iraqis, living so peacefully among the Arab despite being a minority because at that point, Baghdad was even known globally as the city of peace. His family were a happy family that have no interest in the promise of Zion or moving to Israel at all. But unfortunately, the British Empire backed, funded, and facilitated the Zionists in the new state of Israel to take Palestinian land, and as a result, they and many Arab Jews were exiled from Iraq and had to move to Israel. For them, Iraq was home and Israel was a place of exile, the opposite of the spirit of Zionist supremacy. And despite their roots in Middle East, the father of Zionists knew that it helped them politically to tie themselves to Western world instead of Middle East. But since the author's family grew up in Middle East peacefully, they see the falsehood of this Zionist narrative. Then Zionism started building an even more false narrative that there is a class of culture and that Muslim has always been hostile to the Jews and will always be hostile to Jews. It only alienated the author's family even further since they knew that the factual evidence they lived through countered those false narratives. I mean, the Jews in Ottoman Empire was a protected minority. Ottoman was considered a safe haven for the Jews, and this continues during the early period of the Iraqi kingdom. Anti-Semitism did not originate from the Muslim community. It was from the white supremacists of the West that eventually grew to be the Nazi and the neo-Nazi of the world. It was Zionism that changed Arab perception of Jews because of Israel's time and ethnic cleansing on Palestine. In fact, The Zionists had such a supremacist ideal that at first they are the ones who don't want to take Jews from Middle East because they consider them to have come from inferior culture, focusing more on gathering the European Jews instead. It was not until the Holocaust happened that they grew more desperate at gathering Jews to form a state that they started planning and executing the Nakba in 1948. Three things happened during the Nakba. First, of course, is the deliberate expulsion of 700,000 Palestinians from their home, an expulsion that is supposed to only be temporary, but it never stopped until it created the PLO, the Intifada, and much later on Hamas, and now. The second is, of course, an increasing hostility in Middle East between Arab and Jews. After all, the Nakba is not the only vile thing that Israel did in Middle East. Hezbollah, for example, was created in response of Israel attack. Then the third is the erasure of Arab Jews' identity. There is Russian Jews, American Jews, Boston Jews even, etc. But Arab Jews are unacceptable in the current Zionist-centric Israel. It is the result of one of the few propagandas that Israel created in order to defend their indefensible action in Palestine. The other is the false narrative that is also present in Itan Israel propaganda narrative, the Jewish version of the Nakba, where according to the Zionists and no one else, because it's not based on factual historical accuracy, the Jews was exiled from Arab countries for no reason but anti-Semitism. It's false. But we first need to go back to the end of Ottoman Empire in World War I, where British and French colluded to break the Middle East apart. British, who at that time was on an oil rampage, tried to make sure that Iraq stay as a loyal ally, something that I also thought while reading a pipeline run through it, which is hard to do since the Arabs there break free from the Turks that treated them well just so they can have their independence. So of course they won't want to be under British occupation. That's when Lawrence and Gertrude Bell come in. They and Winston Churchill befriended Prince Faisal I, and like the devil, the British and French offered King Faisal an Arab kingdom of his own that included Syria, Lebanon, Palestine, and part of northern Mesopotamia. But once he got into power, France took over Syria and Lebanon, while British took over Iraq and Palestine. Faisal, who cannot accept their colonization attempt, attacked France, who was far more openly hostile to the Arabs there, but lost and pushed to Damascus. It was only with the help of Britain that he can still be the puppet king of Iraq. The British rigged the election at Iraq and outed their previous king to put Faisal in the seat of power. The event signaled the start of a very long Western and imperialist interference in Middle East that is still ongoing today. Many Arabs there of course suffered under British rule. Winston Churchill helped create Iraq and he only cared for one thing there, and it's not the people, it's the oil. There is some opposition made by the minorities in Iraq, but it didn't really do much. Britain, who know how to play divide and conquer, instead raised the Christian and Jews position there to lower the position of the other minorities even more, eventually making a Jew named Sir Simon Haskell into Iraq's first Minister of Finance. And to be fair, Haskell did a great job as Minister of Finance, so good that he was re-elected over and over again until his death, and Iraqis called him the father of parliament for his contribution there. He also saw the rise of Zionism in Israel and immediately nailed that making a Jewish state in the already existing Palestine would create a Jewish problem in the rest of the lands of the former Ottoman Empire. And that was Iraq, the land of peace, and it was during this time that the author was born. His family will even eventually become family with the Haskell lineage. It was a time where Jews and Muslims lived their normal everyday life together. And for King Faisal, despite how he came to power, he makes for a good leader who united Iraqis despite the many races and religions that lived there. There were some right-wing extremists that was born partially from jealousy, but they mostly live in peace. That was until Faisal I had a suspicious sudden death. His position was replaced by his only son Ghazi. Ghazi was more interested in fun stuff instead of learning politics. He was more like Mutahar from some ordinary gamer instead of Norman Finkelstein. So the one who actually rules Iraq was suspiciously and even more extremely pro-British Nuri al-Said. This was also the time when Nazis started to rise and Germans, who is after Iraq's oil, started to heavily spread their European-style anti-Semitism and anti-Jews there. The young Ghazi and many youth there was most likely affected by this propaganda, imposing heavy taxes and restrictions on the Jews. But the one who suffered the most were the Assyrian and Kurdish minority that was massacred by the Iraqi government relentlessly. Ghazi died not long after that, and although Iraq's next leader is not as bad as him, no one will ever be as competent as Faisal I. Meanwhile, not only German propaganda is going strong, but so is the other even worse settler colonial movement, Zionists. They have managed to get British support we even gave them the Balfour Declaration. At that time, for most of Arab countries, including Iraq, Zionism, just like Nazism, was seen as a foreigner concept. Nazism at least can camouflage itself as partially an anti-British movement, but not Zionism. So they have a hard time trying to get rid of the Palestinian. But the Balfour Declaration changed all of that. And even to this day, we are still seeing the domino effect of those few words. Since this is a memoir, for the most part, the book will go through the author's and his family life during the political strife caused by all of the mess above. At first, he will see the Zionist movement from the Arab perspective. He then went directly to the belly of the Zionist beast as he lived in Israel. He even became a Zionist during his ignorant youth and become part of their self-righteous movement when he doesn't know any better. I mean, he even joined the IDF at one point of his life because of Israel disgusting military mandatory to teach the Israeli how to dehumanize the Palestinian. Then he got a chance to see it through the lens of an outsider as he lived in England. And then finally, through the lens of a historian as he studied more and chose to be a historian. It is with the combination of hindsight and learning more about history that he not only managed to free himself of the Zionist supremacist mindset, but he can also see that the long years of Jewish expulsion, one that stretched for many years in comparison to the Nakba, a difference of period that is unlike what Ethan Klein put out in his Content Israel propaganda book. Those expulsion was largely affected by the Zionists helping the Nazi movement in Arab, so more Jews will escape to Israel so they can blow up the number of Jewish population in Palestine, who at that time was too small for their colonial dream. The book is well written and well researched, although most of the book is the author's life story that I skip for the most part. To be fair, it makes sense since this is his memoir, but there are a part of it that felt a bit more like he's trying to co-opt the Palestinian suffering for selling the book because of the lack of details on them. But for what it is, it's not that bad all things considered. I give this a 3. What do you think? Let me know if I missed anything, so leave your thoughts in the comment below and subscribe to the channel. That's about it. See ya.